If you flip a coin 4 times, first 3 times you get heads. The fourth time, it's still a 50-50. There's no momentum there. There's no person that's going to decide we have heads momentum. Say you're shooting from the 3-point line. You've made 3 in a row. Typically, your shooting percentage from the 3-point line is 50%. Most people would actually think you're heating up. You have the momentum. You're actually more likely to make that fourth shot. Welcome back to the show. Another episode of Thought Exchange. Today I am sick, so my voice is going to sound a little off. But regardless, the show must go on, right? Today I'm going to be doing another solo episode. I did one a couple weeks back and it went over pretty well, so I figured I'd give it another shot. Quick summary about what today's episode is going to be on. I'm going to cover modifying our behaviors and the mindsets that go along with that, how we can use our time, and how we can gain compound interest on our time, similar to how we do with our finances. Identifying goals and identifying the types of goals that we have, in differentiating the different types that we have so we can approach them appropriately, and elevator pitches. Without further ado, let's get into it. So to start off, I want to talk about behaviors and habits and how we can modify them. Curating your habits is one of the most important steps towards becoming the person you want to be, because your habits are the unconscious decisions and labors that you indulge in. They're the things you do without thinking about it. Whether it's, for some people, brushing your teeth is a habit. Hopefully for most people, maybe using your turn signal while driving is a habit. Now these are kind of mundane. In a larger scale, in the context of your life, the habits you want to develop, you should be conscientious about what kind of behaviors the ideal version of you commits to. A good example is if you want to learn guitar, then you should make it a habit to play the guitar, right? It's a very simple example, but I think the difficulty comes in instantiating habits and repealing almost old habits. Our old habits come with a lot of baggage, a lot of weight and inertia, right? They've been there for a long time. We've been doing them for a long time. They're part of the mechanisms and coping strategies that we use to get through our daily lives for years, maybe our entire lives, right? If they're habits from childhood. So the first step to doing this is identifying them. If you can identify your good, bad, and neutral habits, writing them down, cultivating a list that shows you whether or not you have the habits you want, whether you're going to bed on time, whether you're brushing your teeth, whether you're as productive as you want to be. Now, it's better to be more specific. Being productive is not specific enough to write down as a habit. But whether or not you sit down with your phone on you when you're trying to work on something that doesn't require your phone. These small, minute behaviors add up into the person that we are, right? If you have a habit of lying, that will make you a liar. If you have a habit of being truthful, that will make you honest. So these little things over time curate our personality as a whole. So if we can write them down and identify them, that's the first step in changing them, because you can't actionably and intentionally change something that you're not really aware of, or that you're only peripherally aware of. They have this system in Japan. I think it originated in Japan. It's used in other places, but it's called like the point and call system. And I think it's train conductors or train engineers. They point out and call the things that they're doing or the things that they see happening. And in this process, you are forcing your different parts of your brain to align and be aware of what you're doing in this moment. And you can use it in many other contexts. So if a train operator goes to accelerate the train, they will say they're going to accelerate the train. They will point at it with their hand, And then after they've said it and acknowledged it, then they will do the action, right? So it is turning the entire process into a co-action between your hand, your eyes, your voice, your ears, and your mind, right? Because you have to say the proper action, you have to hear the proper action. So it's kind of this, it's making sure that all the parts of you are in alignment, because we can casually say something that we didn't mean to say, right? A Freudian slip. Or if you talk through the steps of a process, sometimes you'll skip a step. You won't notice that you skipped a step when you say it or when you do it, but when you watch back, you notice. Or when you hear yourself say it, oh, that didn't sound right. Because part of the process, the entirety of the process is understood by all the different parts of your body and your brain. So recognizing and calling these things out tells your entire body to be aware, tells your entire mind to be aware. So by pointing at the accelerator, your body is acknowledging that whatever step came before, accelerating is the right step, right? Because it's like if you've ever driven stick. If you do things in the wrong order, if you don't put down the clutch before changing gear, it feels wrong. And that's kind of what you're doing here. You're calling out the actions so that even more parts of your consciousness are involved in that process. So if you're doing something wrong, you're even more likely to notice that you're doing something wrong. And this comes in handy when trying to identify and change negative habits, right? So if you sit down to do work at your computer, or let's make it more simple, you're sitting down to write on pen and paper, no electronics needed. And you sit down and you say, I'm at my desk. Okay, well, step one complete. My phone is next to me, right? You identify the variables in your surrounding. You identify the things. That way you can be aware of it and you notice, oh, my phone is around me. My habit was to decide to not have my phone around me when I'm writing, not have it accessible. And you may scan over it and not notice it, but when your hand goes for it instinctively, as many of us will have happen to us, our hand will just go for our phone every couple minutes. Being aware of that, taking that like timeout almost to notice that, oh, my hand is going for my phone. My phone is the thing I said I'm not going to have here. Or if you hear your phone go off because it's right next to you, you'll realize, okay, that is my phone going off. My phone is the thing I'm not supposed to have here. So that's kind of a shortcut or a strategy in identifying the habits that you want to change. And it goes even further than just habits, but practice methodologies. If you're trying to practice something, learn a new skill or something like that, being able to identify the different steps in gaining that skill or in losing that negative behavior is important for implementing the specific change that you want to implement. So to move back a little bit, after we've written down our habits, positive, negative, and otherwise, we want to write down the modifications we want to make. So that way they're in a different part of the brain. Part of the learning process is consuming information. Even though you can generate ideas, a lot of what we learn through is through experiencing things happening to us. And that might be being taught through a lecture, it might be reading a book or something like that. So when you say something out loud or you write it down, it's now being internalized in a different way. It's being internalized in a different part of the brain, because the part of your brain that thinks up ideas is different than the part of the brain that hears things. And it's different than the part of the brain that reads things or writes things. It's a reason why note-taking and rewriting your notes can be such an effective learning strategy, because you're internalizing it in a different way than just thinking about it. So if you take the time to consciously write down the habits you want to change and how you want to change them, then you've done this step of like actualizing them. You've brought them to the conscious level in more than one way, and you've put it out in the real world where you can like hold a piece of paper, or if you want to type it, you can look at a screen and read off the things you want to change. You can read them out loud and be like, I'm not going to have my phone next to me when I'm writing. And being able to do that makes it an intentional action, an intentional thought, an intentional process. It gives you the impetus to remember that experience, remember you writing it down, because the more cues you have to do a behavior, the more often you will do the behavior, good or bad, positive or negative. So if we stick with trying to remove a negative habit from our lives, a good example of this is, let's say, dieting, right? We want to eat less candy. We want to identify and write down, I want to eat less candy. Or that'll be the modification. We're going to write down, I eat candy or too much candy. The change is, I want to not eat any candy during the week. So that is the change. The next step is writing or identifying the cues for that habit. So a cue for eating candy might be seeing the candy, right? So if you're walking through your house or walking through your kitchen, you walk through your kitchen 20 times in a day, maybe. If all 20 times you walk in your kitchen, there's a big fat bag of candy of your favorite kind that's just sitting on the shelf right there, that's just staring in the face every time, those are cues, right? Seeing the candy is a cue. So now you've been cued 20 times every time you walk into the kitchen to eat candy because it's right there. Now, some cues you can't control, right? You might just get a hunger pain or a sweet tooth craving, right? Those are cues you can't control, but there are cues that you can control, and cues are what uses up your willpower. So every time you get cued to do something and you don't do it, right? And in this case, we're not doing it because we're trying to remove a behavior. That's eating up a little bit of your willpower. And your willpower regenerates, but it's not an infinite pool. You can only have so much at one time. So you might not eat candy 19 times you walk into the kitchen, but on the 19th or on the 20th time, you eat the entire bag. And that's what we're trying to get away from. So how do you reduce the cues? That's the third step in this identification process. You write down, I eat too much candy. You write down, I don't want to eat candy during the week. And then you write down a way to reduce the cue. So I'm going to put the candy on the highest shelf in the back so I can't see it. Or I'm not going to buy candy at the grocery store. That way it's not in the house and I'm never even tempted to see it. Because the more barriers you put in front of you and this, maligned behavior that you no longer want, the better off you're going to be. Because we are simple. Easy things are more likely to happen than difficult things. If the candy's there, you're going to eat it. If the candy's at the store and you have to get up, get in your car and drive 10 minutes to the grocery store every time you want a piece of candy, how often is that going to happen? Right? Now, on the flip side of this, in generating a new positive habit or behavior, you can take those 3 steps, which are also an important part of the process and a necessary part of the process. So let's say I want to start learning guitar. Identify a habit that you want to have, right? And that's going to be, in this case, also the change. So I want to learn the guitar, or I want to get better at the guitar. So that's step 1. Next step, again, you're going to think about cues. What is my cue to start learning the guitar or practicing the guitar on a given day? Because if you just say, I'm going to try to learn the guitar more often, well, that's kind of amorphous, right? When have you dedicated time to learn the guitar? You just said, I want to do something. There's no impetus there. There's no action there. That's kind of useless. And you may pick up the guitar once and never pick it up again. So we want to think of cues. Your cue might be as simple as setting an alarm, right? So every day at 5 o'clock after I get off of work, before I start the rest of my responsibilities after work, I'm going to pick up the guitar and play for 30 minutes. So the more cues you have to do something, the more likely you are to do it. So in this example, your cue is the alarm. That's one cue. A second cue could be, I'm going to put the guitar on the couch so that every time I sit down, I have to move the guitar out of the way so I can sit down to not play the guitar, right? You're almost guilting yourself a little bit into playing the guitar. You're really going to move it out of the way and not play it. So another cue. Now you have to pick the guitar up and it's in your hands, and you have to consciously be like, wow, I have the guitar in my hands. I could play right now, but I'm choosing not to, right? That's unlikely. You're much more likely to pick up the guitar and be like, well, I haven't played yet today. Or maybe I already played yet today and I enjoyed it, so I'm going to play again. So now you have two cues. You have the guitar on the couch, you have the alarm, and maybe you can also set your screensaver at work to be a guitar. So now every time you're on your computer at work, you're seeing a guitar and it's spurring your creativity. It's making you think about your guitar. Maybe not the best for your work productivity, but it's just an example. So now you have these three different cues which are all pushing you in this direction of, I'm going to play the guitar at 5 p.m. plus or minus, or hopefully just plus, other times throughout the day. So using these strategies of intentional identification of what you want to do, of what you are doing, in this case, not playing the guitar, what you want to do, practice the guitar, and how you're going to cue yourself to do it, setting an alarm, setting your screensaver. Implementing these steps are the foundation of creating new habits. Just saying you're going to do something and depending on willpower to be like, I'm going to, it's 7:38 on a Friday, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go practice the guitar right now. How often is that going to happen? We all know it's not going to happen because we've all failed at setting up and maintaining new habits that we meant to implement. So the next thing I wanted to talk about are goals. Goal setting, and this can kind of be a topic people get jaded on, right? Because there's a lot of varying advice, and some people say set huge goals, be ambitious. Some people say just set small goals and accomplish them one by one, and you'll end up with the ambitious goal in the end. Regardless of that, there's a different way to divide up your goals. And the way I look at it is event-oriented goals and lifestyle goals, right? One is a process. Lifestyle goals are processes, and event-oriented goals are acute events, right? And the reason you want to identify this is because if you try to accomplish one of these with the strategies of the other, you'll fall flat on your face. You'll fail. And it's the reason we fail at a lot of things, because we use the wrong strategies in the wrong situation. Let's start off without identifying the type of goal we have, but we will pick a goal. So let's say it is weight loss. Let's say I want to lose 20 pounds. Pretty common goal for a lot of people is weight loss, losing weight, being fit, whatever it is. So if you say, I want to lose 20 pounds, well, what kind of a goal is that? So the first step is the language that you use to describe the goal. Saying, I want to lose 20 pounds is different than I want to maintain a healthy weight. Those are two different goals, and the language you use to describe them are two different things, and the way that you approach them will be two different things. So identify what kind of goal you want to set, and if it's actually the goal you mean to set. So let's say you say, I want to lose 20 pounds. So to lose 20 pounds, simplified, you have to eat less and exercise more, right? So over the course of, I don't know how long it takes to lose 20 pounds. Let's say 6 months, you lose 20 pounds. You're eating less, you're exercising more, but to a degree that's not necessarily sustainable, right? Because you don't want to lose 20 pounds every 6 months indefinitely. So you lose those 20 pounds over the 6 months, and then we all know that oftentimes when people lose weight, they gain it back. You hit your goal, you reward yourself with something like snacks or desserts or whatever it is, and that kind of kills the process of losing the 20 pounds. You gain it back, and then 6 months later, you're back at your original weight. So where did we go wrong in this process? We didn't identify the type of goal that we actually wanted. I think the goal that you actually want in this scenario is, I want to live at 20 pounds less than I'm currently living. So how do you do that? That is a process. That is a lifestyle goal. That change is not the same as just eating less for 6 months and exercising more for 6 months, right? Right from the get-go, you can tell it's different because it's, I want to live in a different way. It's not I want to accomplish a thing, it's I want to live in a different way. And if your goal can be framed and makes more sense when you say, I want to live in this way, then you're dealing with a process, lifestyle goal. So how do you approach this kind of goal? Well, maybe you don't lose that weight in 6 months. Maybe now it takes you a year. And you're aware that once you hit that goal, once you hit that 20-pound weight loss mark, you're also aware that now your metrics need to change. Now your actions need to change. Because it's not as simple as, I've lost the 20 pounds and I'm done, I've accomplished my goal. No, it's, I want to live at 20 pounds less. So now that I'm 20 pounds less, now I want to maintain this. So maybe it takes 6 months, maybe it takes a year, but the point is that there's an adjustment there, and it's a perpetual process. And setting yourself up for success is realizing that event-oriented goals don't necessarily need to be sustainable, right? You might work really hard on a work project for, it might even be an extended period of time, but once you've done it and you get the promotion, you don't need to work overtime on that project anymore because it's been accomplished. Whereas a lifestyle goal, maintaining a certain weight, there's no, I maintained this weight for 6 months and now I'm going to go revert back to my old habits, right? The goal is to maintain the habit. And the different strategy here is sustainability. Sustainability is what gets you from accomplishing something once to perpetualizing it out throughout your life. So, let's shorten the time span here. And say you want to lose 20 pounds in 2 months. You might really have to starve yourself and work out a lot for those 2 months if your goal is just to lose 20 pounds. But then when you get there, you've burnt yourself out, right? You've burnt yourself out. You used up your willpower, right? That non-infinite supply of willpower by starving yourself and pushing yourself from a physical standpoint to a point that is not enjoyable whatsoever. So now you have these negative associations with this goal that you set for yourself. If you want to do something that will be a lifelong process, a lifelong sustainable habit, you have to approach it completely differently. You have to approach it from the standpoint of, what small things can I do? What small changes can I make, and incremental changes that I can make in my daily life now that I can push a little bit farther a week from now, a little bit farther a month from now, to reach this lifestyle that I want to have. Doing it in a sustainable way. If we go back to the guitar example, you can play the guitar, right? Your goal is to learn how to play the guitar very well. Now, if your goal is to learn how to play the guitar very well, that's fine, but realize there's a different goal there, and that is, I want to live knowing how to play the guitar very well. Those are two different goals. Again, knowing how to play the guitar well versus I want to learn how to play the guitar or be good at the guitar, right? Because just saying that's an event. You can be good at the guitar and then be bad at the guitar after, because our skills can deteriorate over time. But let's just say it's a sustainable goal, or it's a process, and we want to make it a sustainable goal. There's multiple ways to approach it. And I think we all know people who have, maybe even ourselves, who have, attacked a newfound passion or goal with such ferocity that in a couple months they've burnt themselves out. So a very stark example of this with the guitar is, let's say you You want to start practicing and you're just so enthusiastic about it. So you start off and you practice 5 hours in a single day. And the next day you practice another 5 hours. And the next day you practice another 5 hours. And then on the fourth day, your fingers are so blistered and torn up that you can't play for 2 weeks. Right? That's not sustainable. Sure, you've gotten 15 hours of practice in a month, but 15 hours of practice in a month without momentum, which I'll get to, and without sustainability. If you had practiced 30 minutes a day, broken into bite-sized chunks for yourself to integrate into your schedule in a sustainable way, integrate into the physicality of your body, right? Because you can only do so much with your body. Then at the end of that month, you'll still have that same 15 hours of practice. But in one scenario, you played for 3 days and then not for the rest of the month. And in the other example, you've been playing consistently 30 minutes every single day. And then the first day of the next month, well, now you have a month of momentum. You have a month of built-up habit, of built-up scheduled time, of built-up enjoyment for this process, where now it's second nature, versus you did, let's break up the 3 days. Let's say you did every 10 days, you practiced for 5 hours, and then your fingers were too messed up to play for the next 9 days. You have no momentum, right? You played for 5 days, you're enjoying, or you played for 5 hours one day, you enjoyed it, you loved it, you had a great time. You wake up the next morning, you can't play. And then next day, you can't play. By the time day 10 rolls around, and it's time for your second session of 5 hours, you have lost all of your momentum. You probably don't even remember what you were playing 10 days ago. And that loss of momentum is profound in the process of gaining a new habit or a new skill. And momentum is kind of this amorphous, not super well understood thing, but we know that it exists, right? If you think about athletics, people playing football or basketball or whatever, they'll often describe one team as having the momentum. And it is a real factor. It is a real phenomenon that isn't exactly tangible, isn't exactly measurable, but it's psychological, and so it influences us. Right, if you're on the court, here's the best way to look at it. If you flip a coin 3 times or 4 times, and the first 3 times you get heads, right? The fourth time, it's still a 50-50, right? There's no momentum there. There's no person, there's no being, there's nothing like that's going to decide that we have heads momentum, so it's going to be another heads. Right, it's still a 50-50. But let's say you're shooting from the 3-point line and you've made 3 in a row, and typically your shooting percentage from the 3-point line is 50%. But you've just made 1, and you made another, and you made a third. Sure, your shooting percentage is 50% typically, but most people would actually think that, you're heating up, right? You have the momentum, and you're actually more likely to make that 4th shot. And that's the kind of paradox there, right? Because you would think regress to the mean. You would think typically, they would miss that shot, but no, they wouldn't. They're more likely to make that shot, and that's how it's different from pure probability. So momentum affects us, and when you have those 30 days built up of playing the guitar, on day 1 of the next month, you're going to play the guitar, right? At that point, it's thoughtless. You're just going to sit down and play the guitar. Whereas there's a pretty good chance if you played for 5 hours, didn't play for 9 days, you might even forget on day 10 that you're supposed to play the guitar. Or you might not want to because you have negative feelings and negative memories of how bad your fingers have hurt over the past, week and a half. At the end of the day, developing a sustainable plan that builds momentum is the best way to curate a new habit, to implement a new behavior that you want to have to change the way that you live your life, to change the kind of person that you want to be. And that can be difficult, but knowing and consciously being aware of these strategies makes it so much easier, because you're not going to learn the guitar playing 5 hours every 10 days. That's not how you learn the guitar. right? You learn it by playing almost every day, at least a little bit. And maintaining a good, healthy, body and physique is not done by, binge eating to get up to weight that you want to be and starving yourself to get down to the weight you want to be and just doing that cyclically. It's by doing something small and sustainable that you can implement over and over and over again that becomes normalized. I think that's a pretty underrated and misunderstood aspect of goals, right? There's not just two types of the goals in the terms of ambitious or, everyday, small. It's literally in the type of objective you're trying to complete. Whether it is a discrete event or a lifestyle change, a process change. And when we try to implement the strategies to accomplish a discrete event, when our goal is truly a lifestyle change event or lifestyle change process, we fail because they're incompatible. And we all know that going to the gym after 3 months of going consistently is much, much, much easier than going to the gym for the first time in 3 months, right? Waking up at 6 in the morning and hitting the gym after 6 months of not doing that at all is orders of magnitude more difficult than when it's an everyday happenstance or circumstance for you. When it's happening every single day, your body adjusts, your mind adjusts, and your life adjusts, right? The little tweaks that you make to your everyday life in implementing a habit when it's consistent versus every 10 days, or you haven't done it at all before, you haven't done it in 3 months, you work out all the kinks that are those little barriers that we talked about earlier, the barriers to getting you to accomplish a behavior change that would get you to your goal. Those little barriers can literally be anything, right? They can be the fact that, you get up and it's cold. Or you get up and you have roommates or your partners in the house and you don't want to wake them up. So getting out of bed and having to be quiet, or having to tie your shoes and get dressed in the dark. Right? These are little barriers that if you're doing it the first time in 3 months, you might hit that barrier and be like, give up. Or it's gonna hamper you in some way. So when you do something consistently, you're gonna hit those barriers quicker, and you're gonna hit them with less resistance, and you're gonna overcome them with more inertia and momentum, so that you can work them out of your life, so you can work through them and get through them. And when you run into them, you already have inertia in the direction you want to be going, so that they don't seem as big of an obstacle. The next thing I wanted to talk about was time and our appreciation for time, and using the compounding interest of time. Compound interest is usually talked about in the context of finance, the stock market, investments, whatever it may be. And, it's important to know about for sure, but I think it's equally as important in the context of how we use our time. So if we think about how we use our money, broadly speaking, there are 3 ways you can use your money. You can waste it, you can spend it, and you can invest it, right? You can waste it, you can throw it in the garbage, right? Or you can spend it on useless things that aren't going to last. You can spend it on poor quality products, you can spend it on or waste it on cheap thrills or whatever it is. You can spend your money. Spending, I include this in the category of obligations. Maybe not literal obligations, but social obligations, paying for your house, paying for, a night out with your loved ones or your friends. And then you can invest your money, right? You can put it in the stock market, you can buy real estate, you can buy a startup. You can buy a business, or you can start a business. You can invest your money in a plethora of ways as well. And the thing about money that's different than time in the context of compound interest, obviously there are many differences, but you can spend both, right? And people talk about the framing. The framing is similar. When you think about someone who's very wealthy, the way that they manage their wealth is going to be different than someone who is middle class or someone who is poor. And the advice that you often hear out in the world or out on social media and the internet or wherever it is, there's not like a big warning sign saying this advice is curated for this stage of a person in their financial journey, right? It's just, you should be doing this with your money. You should be doing this. And there are some rules that apply to everyone, right? You shouldn't generally waste your money. But you have to think, like, when $10 is 1% of your net worth, you're going to treat it differently than if $10,000 is 1% of your net worth. So this advice can get misconstrued and misunderstood. But when you convert that advice to time, everything kind of gets much more unified. So people make different amount of money, but people don't make different amount of time, right? Everyone gets the same 24 hours in the day. And we can carry this metaphor, think of it as credits. You get 24 credits every single day. How are you going to spend them? Well, typically we spend 6 to 8 of them sleeping. So we're down to, 16-ish. So what are we going to spend these credits on? Well, as I mentioned earlier, you can waste your time, you can spend your time, and you can invest your time. And those categories are the same as with money. God, I feel like absolute garbage. You can waste your time by spending it scrolling on nonsense, watching nonsense. You can spend time, and again, I consider this in part obligation, spending time with family, spending time with friends, things that you have to do, that you may want to do, but you have to do to maintain relationships, that you need to maintain healthy standing with different people, or just health in general, right? And then you can invest your time. And the lines between spending and investing are a little more blurred in the context of time, but investing your time is so important, just as investing your money is so important when you're young, right? A great thing, or a great graphic. I don't have any graphics. What am I talking about? A great example of this is $1. If you invest $1 when you're 18, and you get the average rate of return, which is, let's say 10% in the stock market, when you hit 65, when you hit retirement age, that $1 is $88. $88 over the course of those 47 years. The compound interest has built up so much that $1 has 88x'd, right? And that's average return. If you never did anything else to it, put it in there. That's how powerful compound interest is financially, but I want to hit home that it's just as important with your time. Because as you learn a skill, especially when you're young, that skill comes into play for the rest of your life, right? If you learn how to get every last dollar out of your taxes when you're 18, obviously that skill is way more valuable than if you learn it when you're 70, because you have more years to utilize that skill. And in general, from the perspective of you as a human being, everyone's time is equally valuable, right? Of course, there's monetary value. We all get paid different amounts per hour, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the things that you can spend your time on, external from, or internally, right? Separate from the monetary value, but the internal value, right? Everyone can spend an hour learning guitar. You can't spend 25 hours learning guitar in a day. It's not possible. So everyone has, as I mentioned before, these 24 credits. And if you invest these credits in learning valuable skills when you're young, that compounds. So if you invest them, let's say, in building relationships with people, networking, How does that compound? Well, now you know somebody. And if they network, now you know somebody who knows somebody. And now if they network, you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And eventually all of you will meet because you're investing that time consistently to have a broader network. That's why, for example, there are like 6 degrees of freedom. If you talk to someone you know, and they talk to someone they know, and you do that repeatedly, only 5 times, that 6th person could be anyone in the world. Anyone in the world is only 6 people you know away from you. So that's why, aside from time, networking is important. But in the context of network or time, that's how these skills compound. And that's just a super obvious example. But, if you go into the mindset behind learning an instrument and you want to be a musician, and we're just going to stick with guitar because that's what we've been talking about. Well, now you've learned guitar and you know guitar for your entire life, right? And we're speaking in terms of, a sustainable lifestyle goal, right? If you play a little bit of guitar every day, well, how much enjoyment are you going to get out of that for your entire life? You'll be able to play live sometimes. You'll be able to play at your friend's house. You'll be able to play, over the course of your life, you'll be playing 70 lives or 70 years worth of your life of guitar, right? Over the course of your entire life. In the same way that if you learn how to effectively do your taxes when you're 18, you'll be doing taxes effectively for 70 years. You'll be doing whatever it is for 70 years, and compounding those things and investing that time in your interests and invaluable skills. What happens is you have a larger arsenal of tools at your disposal to attack any problem, to approach any problem. You have more solutions in your belt, and you get introduced and meet people who have also done those things. So if you go take guitar lessons, guess who you're going to meet? People who know how to play guitar. So if you care about guitar, you know more guitar people. We all get the same 24 hours. Whether you have $10 in your bank account or you're a billionaire, you get 24 hours. So if you look at how productive people, or how the people you aspire to be have used their time, and you emulate that, at least to the degree that you want your life to emulate theirs, you'll see the way that you spend your time is just as important as the way that you spend your money. Because money is not going to buy you learning the guitar, right? It's not going to buy you understanding taxes. You can pay someone to play the guitar for you. You can pay someone to do your business's taxes, sure. But those skills, and maybe tax isn't the best example in this context, but all the skills and the qualities that you have innately in your person, or not innately, but that you've accrued over the course of your life, and that you get satisfaction and joy and value from knowing, well, you only get the satisfaction and value from knowing them for as long as you know them. So if you learn them at the tail end of your life, well, inherently, they are not quite as valuable because you didn't get to utilize them for as long. Make sure you take advantage of compound interest in your time as well as your finances. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was pitching your ideas and being prepared to pitch your ideas. This concept of an elevator pitch, a resume pitch, or whatever. I think it's extremely important. I was thinking today about this idea of, if there was an, what you call an angel investor, someone who is willing to cover all of the costs for your idea because they believe in your idea, right? They're just going to invest in it. They'll cover everything because they believe that what you're doing is that important. If you have an angel investor right in front of you, you happen to see them in the airport, and they ask, oh, what are you working on? What is your pitch? What is your idea? What is your thing? And I was thinking about this because, if it doesn't matter how good of an idea you have if you can't present it well. And because so many stories of success come from like happenstance, people just happen to meet, people happen to run into each other. There's all this spontaneity and off-the-cuff collaboration in so many stories of people becoming successful that having one of these pitches prepared at all times is super necessary. If you wanted to start an app where people could get on and talk about the beer they like. Beer is a huge industry. Sounds like a good idea. People love talking about beer and rating beer. Fantastic. Elon Musk is right in front of you, and he's, well, like, I've been interested in getting into the beer industry. What's your pitch? And you have nothing to say. You've just lost a huge opportunity. I think you always need to be prepared to sell your idea. And I think this is super important because if you can't sell your idea, you don't really know what your idea is. You want to sell beer, you want to sell your music, you want to sell air. People sell all kinds of crazy shit nowadays, right? Regardless of what you're trying to accomplish, if you can't convey the value to someone else, you're going to be unsuccessful. And if you can't convey the value to someone else, it's a telltale sign that you don't know the value internally. So if you're a musician and you're like, and someone asks you, why should I listen to your music, or why should I buy your album, right? This is a not as grand of a scale as an angel investor, but just someone who wants to invest in you or is interested in possibly investing in you. And your best answer is like, well, I like music, and I like playing the guitar, and that's all you got. Well, that's not very inspiring, right? That's not very inspiring from the consumer of the art. You want to have a bit more of a story there. If someone comes up to you and it's like, oh yeah, I'm interested in your beer idea, what have you got? And they're like, well, I like beer, other people like beer, so I figured let's just have a place where we can talk about beer. I think it benefits whatever project you're working on beyond the extent of just having something prepared to tell someone else, right? Because maybe you'll never meet an angel investor, right? Maybe you'll meet normal investors, maybe you'll meet plenty of clients and stuff like that, but just inherently in the process of creating a pitch, you are consolidating the meaning that you're trying to convey to the world, the value that you're trying to convey to the world. You're consolidating it in such a way that now you understand, and you know that you understand what you bring to the table. In alignment with what we talked about earlier, with being intentional about pointing out your habits, pointing out and calling out and acknowledging the things you want to change, the things you don't want to change, how you want to change them. Doing the same thing in the process of creating your pitch is necessary. In the process of creating your pitch, you will do that. And that will be necessary because that helps you understand, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, this is why it's valuable to other people. Now, not everyone is a salesman, not everyone can speak super eloquently and passionately, but in the process of cultivating and curating your 5-minute pitch, it will identify the weaknesses and the strengths, the pitfalls in the future, and the things that you've missed from the past. It'll help you find your niche and then further narrow down, let's say, what your target audience is, who they are, what they want, what they're passionate about. All of these things will come into play when you isolate and pan for the gold nuggets of what's at the core of what you're trying to bring to the world. Regardless of whether or not you're the one who ends up pitching it, right? If you're on a team, it still helps everyone in that room, if you have a team, or maybe it's just you, it helps everyone be on the same page. And even if it's just you, it helps you be on the same page with yourself, because sometimes we're hypocrites in many ways, and our actions don't always align with our other actions, and they don't always align with our words. And both of those things, our actions and our words, don't always align with our ideas. So if we can get those three things on the same page as each other, and also as the other people in the room who we are working with and trying to grow with, that's a necessary step in facilitating the kind of focused and precise actions that you want to take to grow whatever you're trying to grow. And the first step to doing that is creating your pitch. So just to reiterate what we talked about today, one was modifying our behaviors and our habits, effective strategies for changing them, and identifying the changes that we want to make. Number two was the goals that we are setting for ourselves. Identifying what kind of goals, not big or small, but the type of goal, event-oriented or a lifestyle process. Between these two types of goals, you approach them with different strategies. So identifying the types of goals helps you use those strategies, and then back to our first point with behaviors, curate the proper behaviors to reach those goals. The third thing we talked about was our use of our time, the investment of our time, the compound interest on the investments that we make with our time. We touched on the financial aspect in relation to that, but hopefully I was able to help put into perspective how important it is, especially when we're young, to put our time to use in things that will benefit us over the course of our lifetime. The last thing, elevator pitch. Consolidating what you stand for, what your business stands for, what you're trying to accomplish, curating that message and developing it with your team or by yourself to get everyone on the same page so that you all understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and you can further develop your niche and bolster those strengths and avoid the weaknesses and the pitfalls that you see in the future by narrowing down what it is you're trying to provide to the world. Thank you so much for watching and listening today. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow to keep up to date with new content as it comes out. I appreciate your support and encourage you to exchange your thoughts in the comments below. As always, keep an open mind.